drove my brother to the edge, so I took his life apart until he had nothing left. They say there are moments that split your life in two. For me, it was the call at 2:13 a.m. My mother's voice thin, my brother's name choked into a sentence that didn't make sense. Mateo had tried to end it. He didn't succeed. He came back with stitched wrists, a hospital room that smelled like bleach and regret, and a silence that swallowed whole days. The reason he tried wasn't an accident or teenage drama. It was a slow, surgical thing. A boy at school who liked to humiliate and push until someone cracked. A boy named Cameron who liked to film the bruises and post them as jokes. By the time Mateo pulled the curtains closed on the rest of the world, the footage had been shared, laughed at, and then layered into memes. That kind of cruelty does more than sting. It erases you. I promised two things in the hospital corridor. 1. I promised Mateo I'd make sure he could go back to class without ghosting the halls. 2. I promised myself I wouldn't become the monster people warned you about. I failed the second part in the only worthwhile way. I became the person he needed. Not with fists, not with a viral post that trades one humiliation for another, but with a plan cold enough to be precise. I watched Cameron like a scientist watches a specimen. Where he went, what he did, who watched his stories and laughed. Patterns have a kind of arrogance. Do it long enough, and you think you are permanent. That arrogance was the lever I needed. Next came the money. Cameron's father ran a small chain of construction outfits and took pride in being untouchable at the county board. Pride looks a lot like a paper trail when someone who knows where to look follows it. I found minute things, receipts that didn't match invoices, a subcontractor who'd been paid twice and never showed, a lien that should have been recorded. I fed those crumbs to people who ate crooked paperwork for breakfast, a local reporter, a municipal auditor, a subcontractor who wanted his job back. Paperwork doesn't have feelings. It has auditors, and auditors have teeth. Within weeks, there were questions at board meetings, then subpoenas. Cameron began to unravel quietly. The boys who'd filmed him suddenly pressed a hand over their mouths when he came near. His followers on social media thinned as the channels that once amplified his cruelty turned into places where his lies were exposed. He practiced his swagger in mirrors until the mirror quit answering. At school, teachers who once looked the other way started asking him to step into the office. He missed a game because his truck wouldn't start. His dad got called into a meeting where men in suits asked about missing bids. Paranoia is a contagious thing when fed with truth. I didn't want him dead. I wanted him reduced to a man who had to remember every mean thing he'd done. So I engineered the public reckoning the way a chess player engineers a mate. At the back-to-school carnival, where parents cheered and the principal thanked volunteers, I let the auditor drop his packet on a picnic table where a dozen cell phones were chewing content. The packet had invoices and photos and a list of names that tied Cameron's father's company to a history of padded bids. People read, mouths open. The principal's face paled. The county inspector, who'd been on a slow boil, pulled the mayor aside. Within 48 hours, the press had it. The man who taught Cameron to believe he was above consequence suddenly had to field calls he thought would never come. The result wasn't cinematic brutality. It was paperwork and shame and real-world consequences that lasted. The construction company lost contracts. The father was fined and investigated, and Cameron's online accounts closed one after another as sponsors and small-time followers decided they liked profits more than protecting a bully. He transferred schools under pressure. The kids who once cheered him now kept their distance like they'd seen a contagious disease and decided not to be carriers. Mateo? He returned to art class with a sketchbook that wasn't a shy anymore. He sleeps better. He tells stupid jokes again. He told me once, "You made it stop." That one sentence felt like a verdict more than the legal files ever did. People ask if I regret it. They imagine I crossed a line, that revenge tarnishes you. Maybe that's true. There are nights I wake up tasting the same metal I tasted in that hospital corridor. But I think hard about what I would have traded for a brother who learned to love mourning again. The cost was complicated. Relationships frayed. A family lost a business. A boy who could have been someone else now has to live with the person he chose to be. For me, that's justice in the only currency that matters. Safety for the ones you love. If you ask me how far I'd go to protect my brother, I'll tell you plainly, farther than he ever thought someone could walk.